Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about more sweet MTG tournaments with more sweet decks, all that kind of cool stuff. This is another pretty sweet big tournament. This one was from, I believe this is the monthly from February, and got top 16, got some pretty cool tech, some pretty interesting stuff, so let's get to it. All right, and now we have Full English Breakfast. One new thing I noticed, because this is pretty much nothing too out of the ordinary here, right? You got all sorts of funny things you can do by, like making a Hypnox and exiling your opponent's hands and the Devourer combo and all this good stuff. But I did notice that I was playing a Palinchron, which is kind of interesting. Palinchron can do some interesting things by, say, um, giving you infinite mana with 8 lands, so that's pretty sweet, although obviously one of them can't be City of Brass because that would, kill you. But so 8 lands will give you infinite mana, so that's kind of neat. Um, as well as it gives your ability for your Vorash Shapeshifter to dodge removal like in mid combo and things like that, so that's pretty neat. I'm not sure if there's any other uses for it that I can see off the top of my head. But those are the two main big ones. But yeah, nothing weird here. Got some cards that are hating against all sorts of different things in the sideboard. Some tribal hate, and then hate for enchantments. And then small weenie decks, with Plague Spitters, Anti-Swarm, of course, being quite good against control decks and things like that. So yeah, pretty normal list here. I wonder if Palinchron's going to be stock going here forward, but it's a pretty sweet card anyways. All right, now we have, of course, friggin' life. That's right, live and wish in life, and you're living and loving life, and you're getting lots and lots of life. This one's pretty cool because it combines the survival of the fittest package in here, which again I don't remember seeing previously. I remember seeing stuff like Living Wish and maybe stuff like Worldly Tutor, but yeah, uh, uh, survival makes sense in here. It's pretty sweet, pretty good. I guess you even have Academy Rector to fetch it. And you have all sorts of things like Mother of Runes, which is pretty good against opposing removal spells, and of course things like Collar of the Claw in the sideboard is also another good thing to tutor up when all your random dorks get killed. Well, now you get a bunch of random dorks back, which is pretty sweet. You got a lot of ramp and Birds of Paradise, Wall of Roots, and of course you have your life combo, and you have stuff like Massacre, so a way to beat up on really if you're just going long against any deck that cares about the board or whatnot. Massacre is pretty good there, obviously quite good against little weenie decks. And Genesis. Genesis, of course, is very good at recurring like your combo pieces and things like that. So yeah, pretty interesting, pretty sweet. Definitely makes sense. I think really to play it like as a survival deck. I haven't played Life with survival, but this is pretty cool. Definitely a pretty interesting development. I mean, obviously survival is kind of just worth running if you're playing a green deck with like a bunch of green mana and a bunch of creatures, right? So like 24 plus at least. Like I like 30, depending on what else we're doing. But yeah, this is pretty sweet, pretty sweet. Okay, and now we have another survival deck. Of course, this one is more based around red-green beats, which is pretty sweet because I felt like there was always one or two cards that were sort of missing for like just a pure sort of weenie strategy for the red-green decks to really succeed. Survival, of course, helps by, well, giving you more of the best creatures you have, or just going up on the chain and playing more expensive stuff like Blastoderm. And of course, Basking Root Wall is, pretty sweet survival card. That's one that's been gosh, that's been good since at least like 2005, 2004, at least in some formats, so that's very cool. And then of course you have things like Grim Lavamancer, Ren Flametone Kavu, and Deranged Hermit, and of course Anger as cards that you'll want to be tutoring off your survival. Oh, and the Priest of Titania, that's pretty sweet. Of course, it works pretty well with all your elves. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on here. You know, Bastion Rootwall is a great mana sink too. You know, you got a bunch of little Rootwallas, little happy lizards. Call of the Herd, of course, very good against control decks. If you just need like, if a three mana 3/3 and a 4 mana 3/3 and one card is what you're looking for, again, which is typically pretty much exactly what you want against most control decks, great. That's awesome. You're good to go. And the sideboard is everything you would expect a red-green to play. Elemental Blast against blue decks, Spike Feeder against other aggressive decks, Naturalize, of course, just as additional artifact and enchantment hate. Elvish Lyrist is a tutorable enchantment hate. Hull Breach, again, same thing as with Naturalize, except a little bit stronger but slower. Sharpshooter, FTK, all sorts of good stuff. So yeah, this is definitely a pretty sweet deck list. Definitely really, really cool. Seems to have cracked the code, so to speak, on the red-green deck. So yeah, just make it like a red-green survival deck, right? So yeah, there you go, pretty sweet. And of course we have River Boa here. I love River Boa. I think in my old red-green survival deck, I don't think I remember playing. Oh gosh, that video was a little while ago. I'm trying to think. I don't think I played, like, what did I play? I played a lot of, I think I played a lot of Siobhan Worms and stuff. I can't remember. Whatever, I love Siobhan Worm. You can't stop me from playing it. Anyways. Okay, and now we just have a blue-red Devourer deck, and yeah, it's got Urza's Bauble. That's a little uncommon, but Urza's Bauble is quite good with something like Tangle Wire, which is pretty sweet. So you can drop your wire and not really hinder your development too much, just tap your baubles, and then after you're done with your baubles, you can always, of course, sack them to see what your opponent has in their hand, as well as you can just use them to sack to tinker or something like that. So, yep, nothing too weird here. Same sort of stuff in the sideboard: bridge, blast, welder, pyroclasm, etc., etc. Yeah, same old stuff we've been seeing with the Devourer deck. Okay, and this is the Rock. And what we got here? Well, we got 24 lands, we got 20 creatures, some removal, some duress, single target spells, and then deeds and recurring nightmares. So this is about as stock as it gets. Yeah, we got a City of Brass, because sometimes it just felt like maybe the mana wasn't quite good enough, and I'm certainly a fan of, you know, hedging your bets, just like, you know, just in case. This is probably just going to be better than, you know, a basic, but of course you don't want too many. Dust Bowl and Volast Stronghold are both cards I like very much. Very good against other mid-range decks and or combo decks or control decks or whatever. Obviously, Dust Bowl's a little slow against a lot of the combo decks, but if you can, you know, tear apart their hand or whatever, then Dust Bowl them once or twice, you're definitely in a pretty good position. So sweet stuff there. And of course, yeah, Edict, Vendetta's removal. More duress in the sideboard. Again, that's something I like always quite a bit. The random Haunting Echoes in the board I'm a big fan of, because it's so good as just a way to close the game. Another way to attack decks that's not based on just beating them with creatures. It's another piece of disruption. Haunting Echoes is so good as one of. It's really quite good here. You got Crypts against, you know, graveyard decks, Spike Feeder against aggressive decks, Plague Spitter against weenie decks, E-Plague against tribal decks, and of course Naturalize. Gotta love Naturalize. Yeah. We do have a Phyrexian Plague Lord. That's not super uncommon. That's a very old school rock card. But that card's pretty sweet. And of course Krosan Tusker, which is a sweet card, quite good with recurring nightmare. So yeah, pretty stock list, but I definitely like a lot of the numbers. All right, and now we have the Standstill, Lightning Rift, Mox Diamond, Blue-Red control deck. This deck, of course, is quite sweet. I really like the blue-red sort of counter-burn style of decks. Those decks are pretty awesome. I think adding Mox Diamond does alleviate some issues, although it does kind of introduce others. But I think it's pretty sweet, pretty interesting. Obviously, Standstill and Lightning Rift work really well together, since you can cycle cards and kill things under a rift, like man lands or something, or you can obviously hit them for a bunch of damage. So that's really cool. A bunch of cycling cards that you would see in like Astral Slide or something. So something like Spark Spray, and cycling lands and things like that. And of course in the sideboard, things like Slice and Dice, Torment Script, Pyroblast Overload, Hydroblast, and all. Yep, this is all stuff you're going to be used to be seeing. Chain of Vapor is kind of nice as sort of a catch-all for stuff that slips through the counter spells or the burn spells or whatever. Urza's Rage is interesting if you're just looking for a card that has two modes of being good in the early game, or well, serviceable in the early game at least. 3 mana, 3 damages, and instant speed, uncounterable, can be sometimes good, especially against some of the blue aggro control decks, so that has its uses there. But in the late game, obviously, it can basically just one-shot your opponent when you kick it. So yeah, Rage with Kicker still killing people even in 2022. But yeah, this is a pretty sweet deck. I like a lot of the stuff here. It's pretty good. Oh well, actually, I feel like I've been a lot happier with just like one Forbid. It's a little wonky to play two, because then it's just like a 3 mana hard counter, and I'm pretty sure there's typically just better things to do than just like a generic 3 mana hard counter. So drawing multiples isn't that great. It's not the worst though when you're just sort of going for like just having just a ton of redundancy in these kind of effects. Anyways, yeah, we got Mistress Factory's an additional beater, and the mana-based Dust Bowl, of course, again, card very sweet and pretty important in the Standstill decks to be able to deal with man lands and stuff, which are fairly popular. So yeah, this deck is pretty cool, pretty sweet. Okay, and now what do we have? Boy, we got a lot of cool stuff. We got some erratic explosions, we got some devastating dreams, we got some erratic Draco exploding dreams and stuff. Yeah, that's a lot of explosions, a lot of dreams, that's a lot of Dracos, and then of course we have because we have Insidious Dreams and Devastating Dreams. This deck is very ambitious. I'm not sure exactly what the whole. I mean, I guess it's just like I want to play land tax, and I also want to play Draco, and a lot of Draco, and then I also want Devastating Dreams in there too, because why not? And then of course Plague Spitter. Plague Spitter sort of makes sense. It's good against, again, just against the weenie decks. They can't even kill it without wiping their board. And it's a like fine way to deal the extra 4 damage, right? If your Draco, if you erratic explosion a Draco, that's 16, and you need to find the 4 extra damage somewhere. I'm guessing the Devastating Dreams is just a way to like late game just close against people with all the extra lands and things that you have in your hand, and I guess. I mean, that's an interesting idea. It's another way to beat up on well, any deck that doesn't have counter magic. Typically, Dreams is pretty good there. Stuff that you probably wouldn't expect in the sideboard is Sulfuric Vortex. That's a very sweet card, typically seen in Burn or Sly lists. And yeah, Vortex does a pretty good job of doing the last 4 damage as well. And then, of course, usual suspects that we see in these Enlightened Tutor decks and just sideboards in general in this format. So this is pretty interesting. There's a lot going on here. It feels a bit unfocused, but pretty cool anyways. So, okay, and now we have Oath with land tax, and it's just basically Oath, and it plays Bant colors, and yeah, there you go. We've got a Core Haven, in the mana base to do a sort of Maze of If impression. And we got Morphling and Phantom Nashoba as your Oath targets. Like I said, not a huge fan of Morphling, and rather just play another Nashoba. Yeah, this is about what you'd expect in any sort of blue, green, white oath deck. Same thing with the sideboard. All the usual suspects there. Um, Solitary confinement might seem a little wonky, but of course, a confinement's pretty good with, say, scroll land attacks because you have all the extra lands to discard and pretty powerful versus some decks. A lot of decks can struggle against that card. Certainly aggressive decks mostly, and sometimes combo decks for a time too. So yeah. Oh yeah, obviously Arcane Lab, that's a good one. So yeah, that can buy you enough time for your, well, for example, you can establish a forbid lock, and it's like a hard lock under Arcane Lab. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But yeah, that's it's your Bant Oath list. Bant Tax Oath. There we go. All right, and now of course we just have the blue-red Dreadstill. Yep, this doesn't have the sweet cloud of fairies that I love so much, but you know what? No one's perfect, right? No one's perfect. So yeah, it's pretty much what you would expect in like, the Stifle Dreadnought combo. So basically just kind of a combo control thing, just playing a bunch of counter magic and some removal like Fire Ice, as well as Lightning Bolt. Um, yeah, Impulse, Daze, Counterspell, Vision Charm, of course, is the other combo card that combos with Dreadnought as well, phasing it out. Misdirection's pretty sweet. Not super common in these lists, but it's not too weird either, just because, like you can always redirect plows to your other creatures or their creatures or something. So yeah. Fleeing I'm not a big fan of. I think that's just way too cute. But I do like the one forbid. Um, you'll only need to buy it back once or twice or whatever, if you have an active Dreadnought. So that's pretty cool. That seems pretty interesting there. Everything in the sideboard is about what you'd expect. Black Vices are pretty sweet versus the control decks, though, especially under like a Standstill. And so you can go to town with a Mistress Factory and a Black Vice or something, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, I like the blue-red Dreadstill decks because I just like being able to finish them off, you know, with random dorks and stuff. You can play kind of like an aggro control game, which is pretty cool, pretty sweet. Okay, and now we have basically the very similar. I don't know if this is exactly the same. They look pretty similar as the previous full English breakfast list that we looked at. And then, of course, this is the same one that has Palancron. Yeah, all same stuff applies. Definitely a pretty sweet deck, and I like the Palancron tech. That's pretty neat. Okay, and now we got Burn or Sly or whatever you want to call it. Right? We're not picky here. We're not too picky. Same old stuff. You got some baubles. That's about the only thing that's like, some people like bauble, some people do not. I certainly do not, but yeah. Everything else is just what you would have come to expect. There are a bunch of slots that are already kind of locked in, like all your creature cards and things like that. So you're not going to see too much variation in these decks for the most part. Yeah, we got some Crash. Crash, of course, is very sweet. Good against the Devourer decks, or I guess any of the Mud decks or other Tinker style decks or whatever. Yeah, everything else is about what you would expect. Pyrokinesis, Lava Dart, Flaring Pain, Price of Progress, Red Blast, all sorts of good stuff. All sorts of good stuff. So there you go. All right, and now we have nothing. This isn't that weird, but I was like totally taken aback. I was like, my gosh, this sideboard, it's just full of one-ofs. So what do we have here? It's basically the sort of Tide control deck, right? The blue-white Tide, so the Parallax Tide sort of deck. So that's pretty cool. And we do have Cunning Wish, right? And of course, this is where a ton of these one-ofs come in as excellent Cunning Wish targets. Things like Peacekeeper. Peacekeeper is pretty good against, well, creature decks or decks just don't have very little or any removal. Peacekeeper is very, very good. you'll remember it is something that's often boarded in like in L's decks or against L's by Death and Taxes in Legacy, because L's has very little removal in the 75, so more or less same kind of thing here, and of course still pretty good against some combo decks or whatever. Again, same thing, like they don't have removal, they can just be GG. Quash is an interesting one. This one hasn't seen a ton of play. It is 4 mana, but it does super duper mega counter a spell, and then also to heck with all of your other spells with the same name. So yeah, that's pretty cool. This can rip cards out of their hand and graveyard too, which can be useful as well. Interesting to see how this works, but as a Cunning Wish target, seems pretty cool. And of course, Route. This is definitely a sweet card, very unexpected card, which probably makes it even better than it actually is, because, you know, certainly no one's expecting like 5 mana like Wrath, or excuse me, 7 mana instant speed Wrath is typically not expected. Most people don't really play Route in the format, but it is pretty cool, pretty interesting way to just get them, So big fan of that. I like it. It's pretty cool. I don't know how good it is, if it's better than just playing another Wrath God, but it's cool. It's cool anyways. All right, and this is, well, it's ATS, and yeah, we got some Xanted Swarms, right? Figured I'd show this guy. We talked about him already, so that's pretty sweet. And then we got some Ravenous Baboons. I love this card. This thing is so sweet. Well, just look at those monkeys, apes. Well, baboons are, I think baboons are actually monkeys. But hey, who's counting or something, right? Yeah, this card is sweet. Comes in play, nukes non-basic, very cool. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's a little better than something like Avalanche Rider, which has like the stupid echo, which can be obnoxious. But Rider can hit any land and also has haste, so you know there's some trade-off there. But that's interesting. Dodecapod, of course, is a sweet card against discard. Very sweet there. A free 5/5 is very cool. Big fan of Dodecapod. Dodecapod? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's a sweet card anyways. But yeah, this is ATS. Lots of trade wind survivaling and bouncing stuff, and we got bops and wall of roots and wirewood symbiotes to bounce our wall of blossoms, and I guess wirewood symbiote can't bounce wall of blossoms, but like Yavimaya Granger or something like that. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Deck looks sweet. Look at all those lands. Oh man. All right, good stuff. Okay, and yeah, this is a deck, and it's playing some burn spells. And you stop me if you've heard this one before. But yeah, Lava Dart, Flaring Pain. Look at those cards. I love flashback cards. I think the art's so good on them. Yeah, pretty similar to the last list. Although at last list I don't think played Hammer. I'm a big fan of Hammer. I like playing a couple Hammers. Depending on the list, you know, Hammer's pretty sweet. I mean, you have so many good arts. There's like the Portal 1 art, or there's the Portal 2 art, or there's like the 7th edition art. There's a lot of arts. Anyways, yeah, so this is Burn, and this is about what you would expect a Burn deck to look like. All right, and now we have Goblins, except this time is mono red. I don't think we typically see mono red most of the time, but yeah, so that's what we got here. 24 lands, 36 dorks, no non-goblins in the main deck. None of the numbers are too weird. I mean, King is like fine. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I do kind of like multiple sharpshooters, just because when they're good, they're great. And it's kind of like pre-boarding in a way, because sometimes it is correct to play another sharpshooter on the board because it's just so good in certain matchups, basically just against other creature-based decks. So that's kind of cool. So I don't mind that. Although again, the extra King just feels like I mean, I guess it's good if you're like expecting a lot of E-Plague. It's an okay answer to it, but it's not exactly the best. And then of course in the sideboard we have more Goblin Kings. I guess he was really expecting a lot of Engineer Plagues. Anarchy, of course, against all those nasty white cards. Tinkerer against, well, artifacts, but it's also very good against Dreadnought. And Pyroblast, Red Blast, Crypts, PKs, Overloads, lots of good stuff. 3 Ancient Tomb. I think that's like 1 Ancient Tomb or 2 Ancient Tombs too many. But yeah, I like 17 Mountains. Pretty good. So yeah, nothing about this that seems too wonky to me. That's probably why he got second, because it's genius level deck building, or it's just good deck building, either or. Okay, now we have the sweetest deck of all time. There's always room for another Oath deck. And yeah, so now we have a junk Oath list. So this is black, green, white, and you got Pernicious Deeds, you got Oath of Druids, you got all of that stuff. You got a lot of really good disruption, right? So Duress, Vindicate, Verdict, Swords, etc., etc., etc. And that's very sweet. That's very good, and I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of that, because like a lot of the counterspell stuff just felt like didn't feel that great. It felt pretty clunky. This is a little bit more proactive, and I'm a big fan of that. Nothing weird here. We do have 4 Treetop Village, which I'm a big fan of, if only just because it gives you just another way to win the game against creatureless control decks. Of course, you do have the Funeral Pyre tricks too. And then, of course, in the sideboard, just one-ofs. I mean, just so many one-ofs. Of course, there's stuff you can Enlighten Tutor for, like Defense Grid, of course, Curse Totem, or Aura of Silence, or City of Brass, Circle of Protection Red. These are great Enlighten Tutor targets. City of Brass, of course, is good if you need to board it in, if you have more multicolor cards, or just against control decks when you want to always make your land drops, that kind of thing. This is something that some of the affinity decks did back in Extended. For a while, they would oftentimes board in City of Brass because their sideboard was full of just a bunch of different colored cards. So to help cast them, you'd board in like a city. Let's see, Dust Bowl, of course. This is another very powerful card against control decks. Very cool. Multani is a pretty sweet card to oath up because, well, instead of like something like Morphling, which requires a bunch of work to get it to do anything, Multani automatically just has Shroud and is pretty big. So that's cool. A big fan of that. Furnace, and again, pretty sweet card against graveyard strategies in general, or even cards that only sort of tertiarily use the graveyard. Maybe they have like Recurring Nightmare or something. You could probably make a case for bringing in an Enlightened Tutor target for that. And then, of course, some of these cards can be Living Wish for, too. Of course, thinking Dust Bowl, Core Haven, City of Brass. But they can also be boarded in. And then we have stuff like Ravenous Baloth, which can be wished for, but you also board it in, too, because it's a good card to board in for, like, aggressive decks. Just like, you know, like, oh, here's a big Baloth, gain a bunch of life, that kind of thing. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, Baloth's a little bit better versus something like Plow, where Nashoba is not very good against Plow, obviously. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm definitely very interested in this. This is like the 10th time this has happened in the last 420 days. Just picking a random number out of my head. 420 days. There's always just lots of new Oath decks. And this one is pretty cool, pretty sweet, and I like it. I like what's going on here. Very sweet. So that's it. Every tournament, every deck that wins should always be the coolest deck, or at least a new sweet deck that I can talk about for a while. So yeah, there you go. That was pretty cool, pretty sweet. A lot of interesting decks, new stuff, new tech, new thingies. Lots and lots of people playing the game. People really liking the Premodern. So that's cool. That's cool. Can't go wrong there. It's a pretty sweet format. So yeah, that's it, guys. So thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed all the cool, new, weird, sweet stuff. And have a nice day.